Hello and welcome back, and I'm sorry it's been such a long time since I dropped a video, but I've been super busy recently. Now we're in GT Legends at the moment. I know that whenever I've done GT Legends videos in the past, I've never managed to finish a race. I've always crashed out, and the reason for that is this game is racing cars from the 60s or 50s, 60s, 70s and early 80s, and so as a result the cars are quite a handful, and it's very hard to talk on a video and race at the same time. So this time I've done something a wee bit differently. What I've done is I've recorded some races I raced when I wasn't recording, and now we're going to watch them on replay as we make this video. So this first race is going to race around Circuit de Pau in France. It's a road circuit, and we're going to be racing a Mark II Jaguar. Now, one of my friends asked me to do some of these car racing videos. He wanted to see some of them, which is why we're doing them. And I know that he wants to see some interior view, but I'm guessing that other people won't enjoy the interior view as much. So since we can't go back to interior view once we've changed out of it, we might do the first lap or so using the interior view for him so he can enjoy that, and then we'll jump to some exterior view so that other people can sort of see the car more and things from the exterior view. Now that purple car that's in front of us, or it's just behind us now, that was a Ford Anglia. This is an MG midget that's in front of us. As I said, we're racing a 1965 Mark II Jaguar that would have a 3.8 litre straight 6 engine in it. And that's an MG-A, that red one. And that looks like either an Austin Healey Sprite or an MG midget that's ahead of us right now, I'm not sure which. Anyway, I thought I'd start this video by talking to you about the MX-5 rally that I did a couple of weeks ago, that my last video was done during that rally, in fact. You might recall that. Now, during that rally, so although my wife and I actually organised the rally, the co-drivers that we had on the day did not know the route or the answers to any of the questions. So we decided that normally my wife and I, we put ourselves out of the running for any prizes or anything in the rallies because we've already done them. But since there was a fairly small turnout, we decided that we would remain in the running for any prizes or trophies or anything, but my wife and I would not help our co-drivers at all. So if our co-drivers told us to turn somewhere where we shouldn't, we would just turn there. We would do exactly what the co-driver said, and the co-driver had to find all the answers to the question without our assistance, so that we didn't have an advantage over anyone else. Now, when I recorded that video, of course, we hadn't actually completed the rally, so I didn't know the results of the rally, but I was very pleased to actually come first in that rally. And the first place was a gold trophy, although I've got to say, before you get too carried away, there's a shop in New Zealand called Uncle Bill's, and it's a shop that buys cheap Chinese crap, basically, and everything that's there is cheap Chinese crap. And you can buy small trophies for $2 or large trophies for $4, which kind of gives you an idea of the quality of these trophies. So they're plastic and they're pretty rubbishy, but you know, we got them for fun sort of thing. So I ended up getting the gold trophy from that rally because we won it. And funnily enough, the only reason that my car won that rally is because we'd done about 3/4 of the rally. My wife and I had driven around the different roads, writing out the routes and the clues and the questions and things as we went for about 3/4 of the rally. But the last quarter of it, which was sort of taking us further and further away from town, we decided, well, actually we're going to waste too much petrol driving out there now and then driving out there like a week later when we actually do the rally. So we just went home and I used Google Maps to finish the last quarter of it. Now, the rally was finishing up at one of the club members' houses, so he knew where the finish line was, but he didn't know any of the roads taken to get there. But on Google Maps, it showed quite clearly that he lived just down the road from the beach. So one of the very, very last things you had to do on this rally was drive down to that beach, take a photo of you and your co-driver on the beach, then jump back in the cars and go to the final address where the lunch was. Now, because that was done on Google Maps, I didn't realise this at the time, but although he lives very, very close to the beach in terms of distance, it was a good 15 minutes walk through the bush to get to the beach. And because that rally took place on the same weekend as we had terrible, terrible flooding here in the North Island of New Zealand, the path down to the beach was absolutely flooded. Now, the guy that I had as my co-driver that day was one of the elders in our church. He's also in the army, and although when he was younger I'm sure he was sort of kind of like a soldier type guy, nowadays he just drives a desk, but he's still in the army nevertheless. Now, being an army guy, he's got kind of that whole army personality, which is a good thing. I mean, they're great people. But we got down to this beach and I saw that it was actually going to be like a 15-minute walk to get down to the beach, and not only that, but the whole track was flooded. So I said, oh no, let's not worry about going down and getting that photo. And he was typical army guy. I said, no, we're going to do this. We've got to go and get that photo. So take your shoes and socks off, roll up your trousers, let's go. And we're the only team that actually went down to the beach to get a photo, because it was a 15-minute walk wading through floodwaters that sort of came up to, it was only about ankle deep. But it was a 15-minute walk, but bashing through the bush, through floodwaters to get to the beach. And so we're the only team that did that, and the 1 point that we got for actually doing that was enough to give us the win on the day. So it's just quite funny, because I wouldn't have done that. I would have said, nah, let's not bother, and that's what I did say to him, except that he was, typical army guy, said, no, it says we have to do this, so we have to do this. Come on, let's do this. And that was the point in the end that gave us the win. So I was quite pleased with that. You've probably seen enough of this interior view now. This is a very, very old game, this one, hence why there's no needles on instruments and things. And the graphics are probably by today's standards quite bad, but I just absolutely love this game still. There we go, we'll go to that view now. Just because the cars in the game, the cars in the tracks are so awesome. So that's our car there, that dark blue Mark II Jaguar. Very, very heavy car. As I said, it's got a 3.8 litre straight 6-cylinder engine, but very heavy car that it's in. So yeah, one of the things I like about this game, because car racing, I suppose are the same with a lot of computer games, okay? You get games like, for example, Gran Turismo, really concentrated on having the biggest field of biggest number of cars in the game you could possibly have, and really concentrated on top-notch graphics, but they didn't concentrate on the actual racing part of the game so much. So for the longest time with Gran Turismo, you only have races with 6 cars on the track, whereas other games like this one, the graphics weren't as sharp as Gran Turismo, but you could have 20 plus cars in a race. And to me, graphics aren't everything. Yes, it's important to have reasonably good graphics. I wouldn't be happy playing a game where your car is just a coloured rectangle on the screen sort of thing, and you couldn't recognise the cars. I want good enough graphics that you can recognise the cars and get reasonably good, graphics like that. But it's not the end all and be all in graphics. So I'd rather have slightly worse graphics and a better racing experience. I mean, the same way with the farming game. You could have absolute top-notch graphics at the expense of the gameplay, or you could have brilliant gameplay at the expense of top-notch graphics. And I think Farming Simulator have it about right, where they've got the right compromise there of good graphics with good gameplay. And the gameplay could be better, but it would be at the expense of the graphics, or the graphics could be better at the expense of the gameplay. But I think they've chosen the right compromise, and that's exactly how I feel about this game. The graphics aren't the best in the world, but the gameplay is really good, and I think they've chosen about the right balance between graphics and gameplay. As you can see, this circuit doesn't really suit the big, heavy Jag. It is quite a tight street circuit, this one. So you can see, as you can see, I do make mistakes. So I'm not a perfect driver in these racing games. Not by a long chalk. Now it does pay to remember when looking at these graphics though, that this game I think is about 20 years old now. I don't remember off the top of my head when it came out, I'll have a look later on. But I think it's about 20 years old, this game, so you know, it's certainly not a modern racing game, but I love it because of the selection of cars. You see, in Gran Turismo for example, okay, there were only 6 cars in a race for the longest time. It wasn't until very, very late in the piece that they got more than 6 cars in a race at a time. And not only that, but you'd get 1 or 2 cars that were super, super quick and take off ahead of everything else and you'd never catch them. You get 1 or 2 cars that were super, super slow that you'd end up lapping a couple of times in a race. So in actual fact, of the 6 cars you were racing against, don't know why I was so slow there, I must have done something wrong there, grabbed the wrong gear or something, I'm not sure. Anyway, so of the 6 cars that were in the race, that's been the end of the race because it's gone back to the beginning now. Okay, so we'll go back out of that one now. You'd actually only be racing against, 3 or 4 cars really at a time. Now, for the next race, I'm just going to jump out of the game for a second because I want to show you something. Now, as you all know, in Farming Simulator, most of my farms are set in the 80s. And the reason they're set in the 80s is because that's the era of tractors I like. And in most things I like older things. So like Formula 1, my favourite era is the 70s. Because that's when you got things like the 6-wheeled Tyrrell and the JPS Lotus with the ground effects and things like that. So when it comes to the F1, the 70s is my favourite period. Now, for saloon car racing, my favourite period was the late 70s, early 80s. The reason why is they had a class called Group 5. So I'm just going Group 5, in Europe, the main cars for Group 5 were Porsche, BMW and Ford. Now here's the BMW, it's just going to come up now. Now, Group 5 was also nicknamed Silhouette Racing. And the reason it was nicknamed Silhouette Racing is because if you looked at the car perfectly side on like this, okay, you were allowed to do whatever you wanted with the back spoiler, you were allowed to do whatever you wanted with the front spoiler. But with the exceptions of the front and back spoiler, the car had to have the same silhouette as the road car. So you can see there that it does. Yeah, it was just a silhouette. So this one's got the little roof spoiler on there. And the rules for Group 5 were very, very loose. So basically the rules were, they were only a page and a half long in the rule book for Group 5. So you had to have the original glass windscreen and back window, but the side windows could be perspex. Your engine block had to be one that was available in the road version of the same car you were racing, but you could add anything you wanted to the engine. You didn't have to keep to anything like the road version. So like the BMW here, this one, even with this wild wing at the back and things, this was probably the tamest of all the Group 5 cars. And this one had a 3-litre straight 6 in it. Now, interestingly enough, in order to meet homologation rules, they made, I think, 500 road-going ones of these they sold. And the big boot spoiler there, if I go on to the next picture, you can see how big the spoiler is there. It was actually too big, so it was actually illegal to have that boot spoiler on a road car. So what they did when they sold these new to customers, road-going versions of them, they'd have the holes drilled in the boot lid already, but no spoiler attached. And the spoiler would be painted, put in a plastic bag and put in the boot. So the owner could choose to put the spoiler on themselves if they wanted to, and obviously they all would have because the holes were already drilled in the boot lid, but technically the car wasn't road legal once you did put the boot spoiler on. So BMW weren't allowed to sell it with that boot spoiler on it because it was too big and made it not road legal. Now, one of the things I liked about the Group 5 is how wild the cars were. Now this is the Porsche one, and as I said earlier, one of the rules was you had to have the original glass windscreen and glass back window. Now Porsche made 500 slant-nosed Porsches with that kind of shaped nose instead of the normal upright headlight because they found it was more aerodynamic. But for the racing ones, they also discovered that if the back was even more angled than the normal road car was, it was actually more aerodynamic. Of course, you had to have the original back window. So Porsche kind of cheated a wee bit, and they had the original back window on here, and then they had a Perspex back window further back. So the original back window would have followed the line of this side window here, and so there was actually some dead space between the two different back windows. So it was pushing the rules right to the very, very limit, because obviously that one's not really a silhouette of the road-going Porsche any longer, but it was pushing the rules to the nth degree kind of thing. And there's another picture of the Porsche. All of the cars had the very, very wide guards here. So this is it was only the side on that you had to have it a silhouette of the road version. So you could have cars that were a lot wider than the road-going version. Now Ford, the next one I show you is going to be the Group 2 Ford Capri. So this is the Group 2 one, which was pretty wild in itself. It had the radiators moved to the back here and a lot wider guards to fit bigger rubber under. But this Group 2 Capri had the V6, the 3-litre V6 in it. When they changed the rules to Group 5, which opened up a lot more as to what you could do, they went even wilder than this. And I mean, this looks fairly wild, but they went even more overboard. Okay, and here's the Group 5 Ford Capri. This one, they obviously couldn't chop it. Now, if you know anything about hot rodding in the 50s and things, you'll know that chopping is when they cut a section out of the pillars and lower the roof down. And it was very, very popular in the 50s to chop 1930s cars because they had vertical pillars, which made it a lot easier to chop some height out of the windows and lower the windows. Of course, because it was silhouette racing, they couldn't chop it. So instead what they did is they channeled it. They took a section of the bodywork out from above the wheel arches. So there's basically a section from the top of the wheel arch to the bonnet was taken out. They took about 3 inches out of the body there. And so it meant the whole body between the waistline here and the bottom of the car was lower. But because the rules didn't stipulate that the height that the silhouette had to be, it actually still passed the rules just. You can see here the whole front of the car is just front spoiler and grille. There is no area for a front bumper or anything because they took such a big section out of the car. Now the guy that raced this particular Capri, he was over 6 foot tall, and when he stood next to this car, the roof was about his waist height. Okay, now this Capri here is the car I'm going to race in a moment, and here's another picture of it here. So we're going to race this car next. I'm going to show you the video of this. Is my favourite racing car ever, this Capri here. I absolutely love this car just because it is so completely wild. Okay, and if we go out of there, go back into the game now. Okay, so we'll go and grab that Capri and load that replay, and it's going to be racing around Manfeild Park, which is a New Zealand circuit, and this is probably the closest racing circuit to where I live, and this circuit's probably between an hour and a half and 2 hours north of me. So I go up here sometimes, I go up there sometimes to see car racing, normally when they have classic car racing on, because that's my favourite sort to watch. And we'll put it on television view so you can see the wild cars. So there's my car, this black, yellow and red Capri here. This car's probably, generally speaking in this game, as the cars get a higher class and get faster, the handling gets more and more difficult. So the faster the car, the worse the handling. This Capri here is probably overall the best car in this whole game. It has a really good, it has great top speed. It also has really, really good handling, whereas most of the faster cars like this don't. The handling's not quite so great. That's a Cosworth Sierra behind us there, and a Di Tomato Pantera that we're just going past now. You can actually, so there's another Cosworth Sierra ahead of us, and then ahead of that is a blue and white Group 2 Capri. Now we'll definitely be able to take that Group 2 Capri. I recorded this video quite some time ago, so I don't remember where I placed in this race, but given I raced in this Capri, I probably won the race. Now, Group 5 only existed between the late 70s and the very early 80s. They did away with it because the cars was too wild and therefore too quick and things. So this Capri, one of the things they did with the Capri body is to take the body off the production line, they flipped upside down, and they tacked the inside of the body, like the inside of the roof and things, with a grinder to make it thinner, the metal, and therefore weigh less. And it was such that the roof of this car wouldn't actually stay flat. It was the roll cage that was holding the roof in shape. And interesting enough, the roll cages in these were made of aluminium rather than steel. So because these cars were so incredibly wide, none of them ever rolled and the whole time they were racing. But it's just as well they didn't, because with an aluminium roll cage, it would probably have collapsed and it wouldn't have actually worked as a roll cage. It was almost more decoration than anything else. And the rear tyres on this Ford Capri were wider than an F1 car. So apparently even now, because some of these Group 5 cars still exist now, and sometimes get raced for historic car races and things, apparently the tyre companies don't make tyres big enough anymore, so they do one-off batches every couple of years. So what happens if you own one of these historic race cars, when the tyre company says, okay, we're going to do a batch of tyres for your car, the right size for your car, you might order 20 tyres, knowing that, you know, whatever number of tyres you buy right now, buy right now, that's all you're going to be able to get for a few years, because it'll be a couple of years before they do another batch, because they simply don't make tyres that big anymore. As I said, those rear tyres are bigger than F1, wider than F1 tyres. Now, these Capris here, as I said, the Group 2 Capri had the 3 litre V6. When they went to Group 5, they actually went down in engine capacity because they wanted to sort of put some other wild bits and pieces on the engine, and there just wasn't room under the bonnet for everything they wanted to do. So they tried them with the straight 4-cylinder 2 litre motor. They found that the 2 litre motor was throwing pistons out the side of the block and things, because so they went to the 1600 motor instead, 1.6, which is the motor they ended up using. So it was the same block as the 2 litre, but the bore was not as wide, which means there was more steel left in the block still, which made it stronger. So these had a huge turbo bolted to them. Now, this was back when turbocharging was still in its infancy. So nowadays, when they turbocharge race cars, and even road cars often, they'll put twin turbo on it. And what they'll do is they'll do 2 turbos of different sizes. So they've got a small turbo that spools up very, very quickly, and then a bigger one that takes longer to spool up. But what it means is that you don't suffer from turbo lag the same way. These just had one huge turbocharger on them because that was during the infancy of turbocharging, and they suffered from massive turbo lag. So because this was only running a 1600cc engine, if the turbo wasn't spinning, these were actually completely gutless. So the way that these were driven is basically you never stepped off the gas, pretty much. Even if you were on the brakes for a corner, you were on the brakes and the gas at the same time, which would wear out your brake pads incredibly quickly, but you couldn't afford to let the turbo stop spinning. So if it stopped spinning, just got such incredible turbo lag. The car had absolutely no power whatsoever until the turbo came back in. So you had to keep the turbo going at all times. The other thing that was quite incredible with these Capris was around the corners. There was so much flex in the bodywork and all this. So of course they were putting incredible power in these engines. They weren't necessarily keeping, when you increase the power in the car, you should be increasing the brakes and improving the suspension and things in line with the amount of power you're putting into it. But this was late 70s, early 80s, so they were more concerned with just increasing the power as much as possible, and the bodies would flex like anything. So these Capris would often get up on 3 wheels around the corners just because of the body flex. And in actual fact, you recall I said that the windscreen and back window had to be glass, the original glass one still. Well, one of the things that these Capris suffered from is that they'd crack the bottom 2 corners of the windscreen. So the left and right bottom corners of the windscreen would crack all the time. They were always replacing the windscreens. And what was causing the windscreen to crack was just the body flex. Sorry about that. Just the body flex around the corners was what was causing the windscreen to crack. And the guy that was racing this one, I can't remember his name, it was a German, Hans someone or other, or Hans. He commented that the mid-corner, between the on the door you have the window frame that goes around the door, the gap between the window frame and the roof got so big you'd actually be able to fit your gloved fingers in that gap if you wanted to, mid-corner. So that's how much flex there was. Now obviously you wouldn't put your gloved finger in there, because as soon as your car came out of the corner that gap would close down to nothing again. You'd lose your fingers if you did do that. But I understand that the Concorde was actually the same, and some of the internal walls in the Concorde, like between the cockpit and the passenger area, for example, when the Concorde got up to Mach 1 speed, the fuselage would expand, and the interior couldn't expand as quickly, so it would actually open up big gaps between the interior walls, sort of thing, and the fuselage, and those gaps would close back down to nothing again when the Concorde dropped its speed. So okay, I hope you enjoyed that video. I thought I'd just try, because as I said, I can't really race these and record and talk to you at the same time, because just racing these cars takes too much concentration. So tell me whether you enjoyed these or not, and if you did, I'll do some more. I might do one more anyway, but if you don't really enjoy this and you'd rather see farming as I talk, then I'll go back to farming after the next video. But I will do one more video with some replays again, because I was asked specifically to do some of these. Now I do apologise the videos aren't coming weekly at the moment as they were. I've just not had time. I've got a lot of other stuff on at the moment. 30 April was a big deadline cut-off date for me at work, so I had a lot of work leading up to 30th of April. Plus we've just got a house on the market, so we've been cleaning that furiously and working in the yard to try and get that ready to go on the market. I can perhaps tell you more about that on the next video. So I apologise that I haven't been recording videos, and it also means I haven't been watching videos. So I know that I'm about 3 videos behind at the moment, I think it is, and I apologise if you're one of the people that I normally watch your videos and comment on your videos. I haven't lost interest in your videos, you haven't lost me as a subscriber, but I simply haven't had time to be watching a lot of videos lately. But do tell me if you enjoyed this one, so whether you want some more car racing ones, or whether I should just do the one more that I've sort of said I'll do already, and then go back to something else again. Okay, thank you very much for tuning in. Bye.